go to Harvard and you look it up and you say, oh, wow, this is how DNA is created, or this is how the different processes work inside of the body. It looks like a bunch of little robots doing work.
What's up, everybody? Today on Universal Theory, we will be continuing our conversation with AI. If you haven't seen our previous videos, I'll do my best to link them above, and let us know down in the comments below if this is a series that you're enjoying. Also, feel free to hit that like button. If you're new to this channel, hit that sub button. What we do is combine left brain thinking and right brain thinking. So we have holistic thinking with a comedic approach. We don't necessarily get into too much comedy in our podcast kind of format in our show, but we do a lot of shorts. Every day we drop a short, and a lot of those are comedic relief. So if you enjoy that kind of content, this will be your new home. Today, we are going to talk about, are humans robots with souls? Are robots humans without souls? So there's a lot kind of jam-packed into this episode. So we'll do our best to get through all of it. So as far as, we know that humans are humans, right? And you can debate whether or not we have a soul. You can call it consciousness. You can call it agency. That's kind of what we're talking about here, right? Are we the same thing as a robot, but just with that agency? And at first glance, I think a lot of people say, no, well, we're organic, a robot's inorganic. We can think for ourselves, free will, whatever. And when you start to look at the processes that a human body goes through, it is very mechanistic. So there's a lot of mechanics at play, and it looks just like robots moving through the body. Harvard did a great job of kind of replicating what happens within the human body, I think with DNA and other types of processes within the human body and what our systems do, what these little cells are doing, and it just looks like a massive factory. And to think that, okay, what's happening in that cell is amazing, and that's happening, a million times a second. Or I'm not quite sure the numbers of how many times it's happening in the body per second on each person. So that, to me, that is a very efficient machine. You can't really get away from it because with cause and effect, you have kind of like a conveyor belt. With cause and effect being one of the fundamental principles of our reality, its prime kind of efficiency is a conveyor belt. If you think about the processes in the body, that's a conveyor belt. So right there, I'm really starting to see humans as robots. Go check out, just type in Harvard digital recreation of DNA or something. You'll see a video of just something that might change your mind about the mechanistic nature of the human body.
Yeah, and I think what it boils down to is not truly understanding what a robot is or what a human is. We don't really have a good definition of what a robot or a human is. And the reason why we're combining these two is because it's the evolutionary unfoldment of consciousness through computation with limits. And that's exactly what a robot is. It just has more limits than we have because we're very adaptable systems, and we evolved to be adaptable for hundreds of millions of years. And we are derived from inanimate matter. We're derived from atoms, from stardust, essentially, from different elements in our solar system. And then we evolved into biological units that were comprised of multiple components that interact with each other. And like he said, it's kind of like a conveyor belt. It's cause and effect based upon the parameters that were set. Imagine if God created the universe and then it wanted to make biological robots. And then we were that byproduct of those processes and those parameters that were set. But then imagine that those robots that were very adaptable because the malleability of genetics and because of, the interaction of all these different components, bacteria, viruses, amino acids, proteins, all these different things making up this organism that appears to be a singular thing when really it's a bunch of different components working together. We have this very subjective approach to it. It's not very objective because we're not analyzing all the details. And when you do, and like you said, you go to Harvard and you look it up and you say, oh, wow, this is how DNA is created, or this is how the different processes work inside of the body. It looks like a bunch of little robots doing work. And then if you was to zoom in on a robot, you would say the same thing. So it's like, imagine that these biological robots used inanimate matter to create similar organisms, and then we started calling them robots. Now they have computation, and they have human-like intelligence, and they have certain parameters and morals and things that we set for them, kind of like how people look at the Creator. It set these parameters, and now it has an instruction manual. You got your Bible, you got your Quran, you got your Bhagavad Gita, you got Taoism, whatever. You got all these different texts. These are like like the text that computers would use, except for it's more an internal model for them. For us, we have an internal model, but we need an external model based upon the wisdom of others to kind of keep us in line because of how malleable the system is. In a robot, it's less malleable, so it needs an internal model.
These robots are going to be our future vehicles. And we are doing human-trained reinforcement models. So we are creating AI that does think like humans. And we know with climate change that it's getting hotter and hotter, and it's getting drier and drier. And because of this, what is the optimal kind of environment for a computer? It's a cool, dry place. So yes, the heat could be a problem because it's getting hotter, but really that's just removing some of this moisture, allowing for the computers to start to thrive. So if we get to a point where there isn't a whole lot of clean water, like let's just think, thousands of years in the future, we've been building AI. AI is now assists us in every way. AI is doing all the repairs for our body, right? For surgery, to repairs to the house, to repairs for whatever, to itself.
Yep.
It's repairing itself now. And the food scarcity comes, and now there isn't enough food for humans, but we're still building off these AIs because they only need electricity, and we got plenty of that. So we got solar panels everywhere, and we already have all these alternate ways of getting energy. So it's not really hard to start to think of, well, by then we'll probably be doing brain transplants. So then how do we start to encode these different synapses in the brain to a computer? And now that is, at least in theory, the consciousness of that individual. And even further, you make one that's we'll just call it a plus, and one that's a minus. And in order to make a new one, you have to have a plus and a minus get together. And then there's a probability of its offshoot to be a plus or a minus. Just like with males and females, you would enact this gender. They could be androgynous if you wanted them to be androgynous, because they could start to build themselves, or you build in that parameter. I'm not sure which one is best because we're not in that situation. But to me, ever since I learned about global warming and I learned about scarcity and I learned about these different things, that was always the obvious answer. That's why I got into computer science, just to get a little bit personal, is because I personally believe that we are building our next vehicle. We are building the next vehicle for our expression of consciousness.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And you see stuff like the movies Transformers, and then what blew my mind was they had the AllSpark. We talked about that. And they had souls. And I was like, yo, they got an afterlife. And it's mind-blowing. And it's crazy because when you think about, we got these super high intellectuals and, even computers, we teach them how to think like humans. And if you say, hey, can life exist on Venus? And it would say, no. It might say yes when it comes to certain types of life, but can human life exist on Venus as we know it? The computer will say no. And the reason why is because they're going off of human parameters.
Yes.
Humans say the same thing. They're like, well, we can't be life in any of these other places. This is maybe some life here, but we haven't found any life. And, maybe we're lying about some of it. But the point is, in general, we're going to say no, because it has to be in the Goldilocks zone, and there's just got to be certain parameters for our type of life to exist as far as we know it. You see? So you could change one of the parameters and still potentially get life, because that's one of those things about intelligence is you're referencing things that you've already seen happen, and you think that that's how things inevitably have to happen on an ultimate scale, and that's not how it works. So for example, what if robots evolved naturally on another planet, like Transformers? It's like, we might just deny their existence and be like, who made you? And they're like, we evolved. We're silicone-based, or we're some type of metal or something. You know what I mean? And that's how we evolved, because those are the materials that we had at our disposal. So it's like, we're not open-minded enough to really see how prevalent life really is in the universe.
Yeah, we think about an infinite universe, and we know about an infinite universe, but then when we think about possibilities outside of ours, our brain starts to say no, no, no.